Okay, of course it's not possible to wrap up this day in 10 minutes. And I'm just throwing in some new impulses, but maybe they'll connect to a lot of stuff that has been said today. And I'm trying to get on the meta level again on research and video, and try to convey something about the point that our project has reached now and the prospect that we are facing for the last year. I called it, Look What I Found Out, because I think it's very much about a gesture of showing, not of showing off. And I'll draw on Uri Alon, and he has a model of the research process, which he starts with, you have an A, you have a question, you have a starting point, and you have B. And this is pretty much the research plan. So you promise the funding society to start from A and use your methodology and get to B. But the actual situation is more like this. The research process is not linear. I think the people who are doing design research will know this. But the experiments go wrong, the categories don't work, everything goes wrong. So, and this kind of seems like the process is going the wrong way because we're not moving to B. So Uri Allen, he says it's a pattern. It happens every time we do research. So we get to something that he calls the cloud. And the cloud stands as a metaphor for the unknown. Because when you look at A and B and the line between, it's all known in the research plan already. But actually, research is about going into the unknown. So the kind of going off track is part of the research, and it's a good thing, actually. We're going into the cloud, but it feels very uncomfortable for the researcher because we think we get lost. So this is kind of like a crisis of the researcher, what we would call a crisis in grammatical terms. And from there, something new emerges. If you stay in the cloud long enough, if you look at your material long enough, something new appears, a pattern appears, or an insight appears. And again, experiments go wrong and categories don't work, but eventually you leave the cloud and you arrive at point C. And then you'll do this. You'll publish a paper which goes from A to Z, and you kind of make the statement that you start from A and you come to C, and you kind of erase the steps in between. So this kind of is the paper fraud of scientific papers, that you kind of you leave out the messiness of the process. So this is kind of, this relates to storytelling, as Raphael already told. We are talking about the structure of the process and the structure of the paper, and it largely follows the IMRAD model, which is introduction, method, result, and discussion. And this could be, and I kind of compared this to the hero's journey, and it's also the ground of storytelling in scientific contexts. You have an introduction, you have a methodology, you have results and discussion. That's the IMRAD method structure. It's in German. Oh, no, it's not in German. I translated it. Good. And on the right side, you'll see something like the hero's journey, where you have a platform, you have a departure, you have a crisis, you have a climax, you have an end. I'm not going to go into this very detailed now, but as same as in the model of Uri Allen, the main parts, the central parts, are left out in a way if you examine it closely. The crisis is left out, and the climax in many cases also is left out. So you jump from the methodology to the results. It's like the hero is preparing for the journey, and suddenly he's there. That's the storytelling of a normal paper. And my thesis would be the IMRAD model is good at communicating results. It's not so good at communicating the process of research. And scientific storytelling and the use of video could do this better, ? Storytelling must not go at the expense of scientific depth, of course. Scientific storytelling might be better in conveying the messiness and the experience of research. And this is important, without losing the complexity. And I think storytelling could maybe solve this problem. Because the messiness, of course, would not be readable for anybody. So we have to get to some kind of readability for the academic society. Now, as I'm going very fast, but I think it's because we are very late. I have a suggestion, so this is something I will throw into the project team, and nobody of the project team has seen it up to now. It's a suggestion how we can maybe tell the story of the researcher through the process in a qualitative video analysis. This kind of research is closely related to ethnographic work or ethnomethodologic work, and to sociology work, grounded theory also. It always works on two levels. It works on a macro level, where you have all the videos that you gathered, and it works on a micro level. And the trick is kind of like a movement between the two sides. You step away from your material to the theory and to the meta-analysis, and then you step very, very close. And this is kind of the movement that leads to epistemic insights. So considering this movement of going very, very close into micro level, micro-analysis, and getting back to the macro is the journey, or that's what the story in a way. This is a graphic that tries to illustrate this. You have a macro level, and you start with a macro level because, like Leah, she's coming back and she has a lot of video files, and the first thing you would do is you would make an archive of your video material, and you would probably start getting an overview of what you have, and maybe put some tags on it, what you have. And from there, you would go into something that video analysts or qualitative researchers would call the theoretical sampling. So you try to identify a small piece of your material that serves as a sample for what your thesis is. So you don't want all the material. You only want one sample, and it can be very, very small, depending on what your working background is. So you identify the first sampling, you have a micro-analysis. From the micro-analysis, you go to a first hypothesis, and from there you go back to the macro level with your hypothesis, and you try to find another sample that has minimal contrast to your first sample. So it should support what you found in the first one. And you do the same thing again. You go to this next sample, you analyze it, you try to find the overlaps, you try to find categories, you have a second hypothesis, and in the next round you build another sample, you search for another sample which has a maximum contrast. And then you do the same thing again. In a way, this relates to what Raphael said in the morning. You have an antagonist, which is the maximum contrast, and you have something like what's the word for it? The friend, which is the minimal contrast. So this is kind of also a story that's being told. And I think we could move to a video analysis or a publication of this process that can show the iterations and the movement from micro-analysis to micro-analysis, and use annotations on the way. I hope I'm not going too fast. This could be a scheme of the publication of a qualitative research process. The microanalysis, I think, could be published in full length in this video with annotations, And in the macro analysis, you would maybe see the researcher himself or herself explaining what he or she does. Like, how did we get to the sample? What conclusions did we draw? How did we get to the second sample? What conclusions did we draw? But it could also be something else on the macro level. So this would be my suggestion. Tell the research process in a chronological way. How did we start the process? Which in a way is also the background of the IMRAD model and of all papers. They start they tell the story in a chronological way. Display the micro-analysis of video, samples in full length with annotations, using research video, for example. Find clever ways to display the macro analysis. Talking heads of the researcher could be a way, or animations or graphics. And tell a story of moving back and forth from macro to micro analysis with results slowly emerging in the process. So this could be something that has similarity to the IMRAD model, but also reflects on qualitative research needs a little more. All in all, when we talk about storytelling, this is just a reminder, we need to define something like scientific depth, describing the precision of referencing, the adequacy of the method, and the rigor of argumentation, in order to find something that is comparable to traditional and already established methods of publication.